First of all, just want to acknowledge Malvika, Anuttama, Shweta, Dhruva Prabhu, and Amit for having their video on because it makes it feel more personal. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm talking to a blank screen. So thank you. Love seeing your faces. And that is also a little cheeky way to let everyone else know who's not on video. If you can please be on video, I would appreciate it. So at least I can see your face and see how you guys are doing. So I want to start off with this. So tomorrow we know is Nirjala Ekadashi, which is a very auspicious day in the Vaishnava calendar. Yeah, the Pandav Nirjala. I think I have it right. Tomorrow is, because I have it marked in my calendar. So it's not tomorrow? Is it tomorrow?
Yeah,
it is
on a new Vrindavan calendar, so.
Oh, okay.
It's tomorrow, don't worry, it's tomorrow.
Okay. So anyways, it is coming up. So, and I was just thinking about this, that what can I speak about that can also sort of set us in the mood towards that? And, one aspect of the fasting is the fasting, increased number of rounds. But another aspect of Ekadashi is self-introspection. And Bhakti Vinod Thakur, one of the acharyas in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, actually talked about this, that every Ekadashi, we should sort of take an inventory and sort of self-introspect, because it's very key in a practitioner's life to be able to self-introspect and sort of understand and take an inventory of the direction they're going in their spiritual life. So the other benefit of self-introspection is that it helps us unbox the convoluted sort of concepts in a way that is healthy and progressive for us. Day to day, we see that we are faced with so many challenges. We are faced with so many sort of, provoking situations, or situations that we don't necessarily, can't comprehend or can't understand why they're happening. If you guys have social media or have been on the news, you can already see one good example of this is what's happening in Minneapolis. Very sort of characteristic of what is to come in Kali Yuga, or what happened in Minneapolis as well. So self-introspection is important in the sense that it helps us see the world, and then it helps us unpack it and sort of make sense of it in line with the guru, with the sadhus, the devotees, and with the shastras, the knowledge that's encapsulated by all these three personalities. So the concept that I wanted to sort of speak about today that can be a part of our self-introspection is this concept of winning and success, or on the flip side, losing and failure. And I'll sort of explain why, because there's so many other things that we can, sort of declutter, but this is one thing that I chose, and I'll give you the reason why shortly. So, although the topic is called the difference between winning and difference between winning and succeeding, the flip side is also the difference between losing and failure. That's the converse, converse of that. Now, the reason why I picked this topic specifically is because what I have seen in my life and what I see in the life of others is that when we win, and again, I'll make sure I define the two terms, but when we win, we sort of take that as our benchmark to be that, oh, we're successful. Yeah. So, and in this way so what I mean by that is, let's say an athlete wins a race, 100-meter sprint, and they're like, okay, my life is now a success. And in this way, and I see this happening that is a very simplistic way, but I see this happening in devotees' lives as well. And what that leads to is actually an overestimation of their progress. Meaning that by these, individual wins, devotees and ourselves, we start to think that we are actually better than we actually are. And it sort of impacts our ability to pursue qualities such as humility. And on the flip side, what happens is when we lose, of course, everyone in this world is going to lose in some way, shape, or form at some point or another. When we lose, we actually take that to be a failure in our life, right? We start to underestimate ourselves. We start to underestimate the values and the competencies that we possess, that we have been gifted by Krishna, by God. And so we start to think that we are the worst of the worst, or even more, you can say dangerously, this is, in my opinion, more dangerous. We start to disguise our low self-esteem as pseudo-humility. And so the reason why, so you can see that, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I can relate it in my life where both of these have been true, where I have won something, and because of that one incident, I've said, oh yes, I've made it. And that has allowed me to become arrogant. That has allowed me to become, puffed up, as they say. And on the flip side, then, because I've lost in one incident in some way, shape, or form, I have seen myself as a failure, or seen myself, and that has impacted my esteem. That has impacted my, self-confidence. And I've disguised that as humility when it's really not the case. So the aim of this talk is to actually help us understand, make us conscious of our actual position, right? Help us understand that while we have some capabilities, we are not arrogant. Understand that we are gifted without being arrogant. And then understand that we do have some weakness without being paralyzed by our insecurities that come, as a result of that. And so this is what I wanted to speak about. Given that tomorrow is Ekadashi, this is something that maybe we can introspect on, that we can think about, and we can take an inventory, and in this way declutter this concept and progress in a healthy way. So the first thing that I'm going to put out there is, as the title suggests, there is a difference between winning and succeeding. Spoiler alert. And the difference is that winning is actually inferior to succeeding. Okay. Now, the rest of the talk is going to be like, how? A lot of people, when I was also thinking about this, I was like, winning and succeeding is like the same thing. But I'm actually going to demonstrate how they're different, and how one is actually superior. Succeeding is superior than winning. So the first point that I want to make, that sort of that makes this valid, or makes this sort of true, that winning is inferior to succeeding, is that winning, if you think about it, think about an athlete who's running down a 100-meter track. In order for that athlete to win, he or she needs to depend on the other 7 or 10 other people losing. You cannot have winners without losers, right? In order for someone to win in this world, there needs to be someone else who is losing. Which means is that in order for me to demonstrate I am better, I have improved, I have won, it needs to come at the cost of somebody else's defeat. Okay? That itself can sort of tell you the nature of this word, the etymology, the connotation that's associated with this word, winning. Okay? Succeeding, on the other hand, doesn't really rely on the fact that of someone else's defeat, but more so, if you try to understand, and if you go and you look at the definition of the word of succeeding and the way it has been used, It's more so about just being better than ourselves without the cost of somebody else. Okay, that is success. It's an example is this. If you want to, let's say you're working out, right? You're exercising and whatever. Your success in exercising is not going to be based on somebody else's. You have to ask yourself, where was I 2 months ago, 1 month ago, or even like maybe 2 years ago, and where am I now? So succeeding is not really at the cost of somebody else. It is just being better than who I was or my past self. Okay. So you can already see how succeeding is superior to winning, because succeeding doesn't involve or doesn't require us to pull someone else down. It just requires us to push ourselves up. Okay. Now, this concept of winning versus succeeding, you can already start to see how the material world is really just about overcoming somebody else or stepping on someone else to reach to the top. And this is the idea when I was saying that winning is actually a material concept, where succeeding is just about bettering ourselves. And if in the one of the sacred texts, it's called the Madhurya Kadambini, it talks about the progress of a devotee's spiritual life. And in that, the idea is that a devotee's spiritual life is more so based on their past self and their own journey, irrespective of what everyone else is doing around them. That is what success in devotional life is. Okay? So now I hope everyone on this call can start to see the subtle differences between winning and succeeding. At this point, I just want to take a break and just ask if there are any comments, if there are any questions, because we're going to just basically build on this. So if you do not have any questions or comments right now, or if you have any questions, then I want to address those before we continue to build on this. So please, if there's any questions or comments.
Adi, I have a question.
Mhm.
I think, well, you explained that point from the scripture that you mentioned really well. So if you could tell us more about that, I'd love to know.
Tell more about how this concept is related in the scriptures.
Yeah, like something like Madhuri, I just couldn't remember.
Oh, yes, Madhurya Kadambini.
Yeah.
Okay, so Madhurya Kadambini is like, so let's say you're going on a journey and let's say you go on a trek, right? And you have to get to the summit, the apex of a mountain. As you're going through that journey, when we go on a hike, you often see that you've reached this much elevation, you've reached this much elevation and you have this much left to go. And so when we go on our spiritual life, it's like, the way I like to think about it, it's like a trek to the apex of a mountain, right? I need to see, okay, I've done so and so much. So where am I right now? At which elevation am I at right now? And how much do I have left to go? So the Madhurya Kadambini is like sort of this text that defines a devotee's spiritual progress. At stage one, what is the characteristic of someone at stage one? How does stage one look like? What are the characteristics, and how can one move from stage one to stage two? Okay, they get at stage two. This is what it is. These are the characteristics. This is how a person behaves. This is their emotions. This is their mood. And so in this way, it sort of lays down the various stages of devotional life, of spiritual life. And so this text can sort of help us understand that where we are in our spiritual life. But the point I was making is that this text that is helping you understand how to be successful in your spiritual life does not really comment on how others are going to treat you. It's very focused on, it's not really me versus them, it's me versus me. And that is the difference between success and winning. Winning is me versus you. Succeeding is me versus me, without the cost of putting anyone else in harm's way. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's a beautiful point of reference.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Malvika, anything?
No.
Okay, okay. So that concept is clear. We're going to move on. So if let's think about it now at this point, right? You have winning and succeeding, but what sort of thinking underpins a winner versus what sort of thinking underpins someone who is successful? I've already sort of alluded to this point where saying that winning is me versus you, whereas succeeding is me versus me. But when we really go down and we really start to, and these lessons, by the way, are all present in our scriptures. I can give you, at the end of the talk, I can say the references where I got these from. But when I was looking through the scriptures, the epics, such as Ramayana, which describes the life of Lord Ram, or Mahabharat, which describes the story of two families, or the story of the family of Kurus. And within that you had one family called the Pandavas and the other family called the Kauravas, and how they went, and the conflict between the two. So when I was looking through these texts, it occurred to me that winning is actually comes from a place of competence. In order for me, and just think about it, just please, if you can entertain this thought, if when you're winning in a race, it's really your ability, your stamina, your endurance, your athletic ability that will determine whether you win or lose, period. Right? But in success, and so even if you consider this for a job, in a job, if you, that's why they say we are going to, I won, I won the job, or I won the competition. It's mainly focused on competence, right? I know nowadays the first screen is just your resume, and then after that they send a test to you where you have to do some sort of like IQ/EQ test to understand your thinking and everything. And then you go, and we have two HR professionals on the call, so they can either refute or attest to this. But it's really about competence. There is something there is some sort of character or personality sprinkled into it, but it's really just to see if this applicant will fit in with the team. But it's more so about competence, right? And this is the key thing, and this is the thing about competence, is that competence can help you win against the world, but character is what allows you to win against yourself. And this is where success comes in. Success is based on character more so than it is based on competence. Okay? See, the other definition of success is, and I actually wrote this down, the peace of mind attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you're capable. Okay? The peace of mind attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you're capable. Again, alluding to this idea that it's me versus me. Okay? And I want to take this a little bit further, is that if you think about competence can help you open the first door of success, the second, third, but really the final door, as I said, to get to the apex of success, it will only be opened through one's character. And this is where I'm going to get a little bit more into it. So again, we know in this world, you go for a job, you go and apply to, I don't know, school. If you apply to university, you apply for any sort of award, scholarship. Everything is based on competence, more or less. And I'm going to put very practical examples out there. Okay, you have this individual called Harvey Weinstein, something like that. I don't know how to say his first name, but he was basically this big movie producer that really got, did some very nonsensical and unspeakable things. But why was he hailed as such a, successful person, or such a, you can say, personality? Is because he had the competence to push out movies that were so on point. But it eventually caught up to him because he did not have the character. So he got part of the way, but in order for him to reach that apex, what happened? His character failed him. Okay? You have Donald Trump. Donald Trump beat bankruptcy 3 times. That is a new level of financial competence, to beat bankruptcy 3 times and then become the president of the United States. But I don't have to go to say the type of character this individual holds. Okay, so competence can get us somewhere, but really it's character, and it's character that determines success, whereas competence just determines winning. Again, going back to the original point that I made, that success is superior to winning. Why? Because with this point, success depends on character, whereas winning depends on competence. Now, this is where I want to take it a little bit further and start to actually explain how we start, like how this actually manifests in our personal life. So you go to school, you realize in order to win a race, in order to do good in exams, you have to have the competence. You have to be fast. You have to be very smart. In class, I know when I went to school, they tried to teach you character, but all you had to do, and I'm guilty of this, that's why I can attest to this, is you just had to put a front to the teacher. And then once the teacher leaves the classroom, or once you leave the classroom, you can be your own, a rascal self, basically. And it'll be fine because you're getting the grades. Okay? So you start to think that, and then you come home, you've done well in exams, you've done well in school, or you've achieved something, and you're congratulated. So now you start to think to yourself, you start to think, you're like, I can get the same level of success or the same level of affirmation if I'm competent. I don't really need to have a good character. I can just put up a front that I have good character and get away with it, because working on a character is so much more harder than working on competence. In order to do good in math, I just need to do some practice problems, or I just needed to do some practice problems. But in order for me to work on my character, I actually need to do so many other things. So this idea starts to come into your head. Okay, in order to win at life, I just need to have competence. You get into university. University couldn't care less about your character, really. All you have to do is, even if you do something wrong, if you're not caught, you have perfect character, right? So this idea starts to further, you can say, percolate, that it's competence that drives it. And then you get into, you finish your job, or you get into the working world, and you see, if anyone has worked in corporate Calgary, you see it's all about competence. People could care less what your character is. If you can deliver the sales, if you can deliver what we asked you to deliver and more at the time we asked you to deliver or earlier, then you are the top performer. You have won at life. And so what starts to happen is we start to blur the lines between winning and success. And we start to say that actually success is not based on character, it's based on competence. This is the idea that the society starts to put into your mind. What starts happening then is you take this idea and you project it on others around you. And you start to, and this is also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, it's going to get where in Kali Yuga, and even in relationships, you start to see this. In Kali Yuga, people are going to go after relationships based on what? Not based on character, based on looks, based on how materially successful you are, based on how much money you have, which correlates to the previous point. But, and even if you're thinking about character, getting into a relationship nowadays, you just have to put your best face forward. That's it. Once you put your best face forward, you get what you want. It's finished. It's, you can, you have won or you have succeeded. And this is sort of the thinking that's going on, especially amongst men of this day and age. So this idea that we then start to, because of the society that we've lived in, because of our upbringing, because of our conditioning, we start to understand that success is more so related to competence and not to character. And that's how society judges you as well, is that, are you successful? Yes, I'm successful. How are you successful? Well, I've developed characteristics of humility and tolerance. No. How are you successful? Well, I mean, I am very if someone needs help, I'm always there. I may not, and sometimes I have exams, but I fail at those exams because I'm helping someone else. You're not successful. You're a fool. You should have capitalized and worked on yourself, worked on your competence, and that would have made you successful. Being there for someone else, sure, that's a good gesture, but you have to focus on yourself first. This is the thinking that is propagated into our mind. Whereas if someone says, how are you successful? You're like, oh yeah, I am, earning 6-figure salary in downtown Calgary. I get to wear nice suits every day, A, B, and C. They're like, that's very successful. Yeah, but I really don't, I'm really intolerant of people who cannot perform, who don't give me what I want at the time I wanted it. Yeah, that's such a good skill to have, because that really pumps out efficacy. That really pumps out performance. And so this idea, I hope you can relate to this, is that, or at least I can see it even in healthcare professionals, where we are supposed to be focused on helping the patient. But even then, there's this trickling that we need to perform, even though it may come at the cost of someone else or of something else. We still need to perform financially and materialistically. And then what starts happening is that we start to judge our level of success not based on our character, but based on our competence. And so just think about that for a moment. When we classify ourselves as a failure or as successful, are we classifying ourselves based on the system that is basically rigged? Because in order, we are saying we are successful based on our competence and not on our character. So we're judging ourselves based on a system that uses attributes that don't really define what success is. It's saying that I'm going to see how far you've come based on your competence instead of character. And so what happens often than not is that we start basing ourselves and we start putting how we value ourselves on the expectations of those around us, who themselves don't know what's going on. As Prabhupada put it, it's the blind leading the blind. I know that concept is a little bit murky. So, and it's difficult to understand or even to explain. But so at this point, questions, comments, clarifications, please go. Well, this is great, because that means I don't have to answer any of these hard questions. So everyone is getting it. Ah, so good. No, I'm just kidding. And this is where I want to sort of now get into Shastra and start to explain how this actually manifests. So in the Mahabharata, as I mentioned, this is the way I see this is between two families, Pandavas and Kauravas, right? The Pandavas, long story short, were the good guys. Kauravas, not so good. The Kauravas were led by someone called Duryodhan. Some of you may already know this and may know the story. So Duryodhan basically is very competence focused. He is very focused on not really developing his character, but just going after opulence, going after having the best palace because he's a king, going after having the most beautiful woman as his wife, going after having the best sort of weapons at his disposal, but not so much about character. Duryodhan's mentality was, I need to get it by hook or by crook. On the flip side, you have another personality called Yudhishthir, who was heading the Pandavas. And his philosophy is, I don't care whether I get it or not, but I want to make sure I do things right. Okay, that's his personality. His personality is all about character, even if it comes at the cost of losing something. Is very character focused, very attitude focused, very intent focused, right? So what happens one time is Duryodhan, it's described, he walks into the palace of the Pandavas, and there's this crystal clear pond in the palace. The water in this pond is perfectly clear and still, right? So at first glance, it actually, you see it as being a continuation of the marble floor that you're walking on. So Duryodhan keeps on walking. He is fully clothed, eyes wide open, and mistaking that this was just the continuation, this pond was a continuation of the floor, he falls in. And he gets drenched, and it's a sight. So the Pandavas, who are standing above this, all the Pandavas, like Bhima, who was one of the other Pandavas, he starts laughing very loudly, like he starts exaggerating his laughter to get his point across. And Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's standing with his queens, and his queens also start laughing. And anyways, the Duryodhan, feels very embarrassed by this. He's like, how can I, who've achieved so much, who has, the greater palace, I have all of this opulence at my disposal, how could I be embarrassed in such a way, right? So anyways, he picks himself out of the pond, and there is this, he tries to conceal his feelings, but there is this rage that's burning within him saying, this embarrassment is a spot on my entire character, which he didn't have much of anyways. But he's just saying that this one incident has ruined my entire life. And now because of this one incident, I'm going to make it my personal mission to make sure I bring about the ruin of the Pandavas. And this is the point that I want to mention. Duryodhan had all the competence in the world. He had so much talent. In fact, when we talk about his fighting skills, he used to fight with a club. And it is mentioned that Duryodhan's club fighting was actually even more superior to Bhima's, because Duryodhan had much more art, he had much more finesse, and Bhima just had brute strength, right? So when we see this happening so Duryodhan has all this opulence, and what happens when someone is opulent, when someone is competence focused? What happens is that any one thing that sort of embarrasses them or anything, despite having all this competence, they forget about that and they get fixated on that one thing. How dare they do this one thing to me? I'm a complete failure in my life. I'm going to destroy everyone who was a part of that. And that's what happens with Duryodhan. Is because he's so competence focused, he's, even one small thing that happens, he's like, no, that's it. In the eyes of the people around me, I am inferior. And so because I'm inferior to everyone else around me, I cannot stand that because I need to win and I need to win all the time. And that's what happens with the Ryodan. And the point is this: when we become competent focused, look, spoiler alert, everyone is going to be embarrassed at some point or the other in this world. Okay, there's not going to be a time where you win all the time. It's just not possible. It's like going, I don't know, getting administered as a patient in a hospital and expecting yourself not to be treated. If that happens, the hospital would not be a good hospital. Similarly, the function of this material world is to give us suffering, is to embarrass us at certain points. And when we are competent focused, when we get embarrassed, we cannot actually sustain it. Actually, we cannot move forward with our life. We become stagnated because in our mind, we need to have all the competence at every single time. Okay? Whereas with someone who is character focused, you look at how many times Yudhishthira Maharaj was embarrassed. His wife was disrobed, or there were people who attempted to disrobe her in front of an entire assembly of men. That was the embarrassment Yudhishthira Maharaj faced. And what was his response to that? He was willing to forgive the perpetrators of this crime. That is character. That is success, because he, even despite this one embarrassment, which is so much more greater than what Duryodhan's is, look at the way he took that into stride, right? And this is what we're aspiring for, is that despite the embarrassments that may come, we're still able to deal with that. Why? Because competence, again, focuses on us versus you, whereas character focuses on me versus me, right? So Yudhishthira Maharaj, what he said is that, yes, this embarrassment happened and my mind is telling me this and this and this. But how do I control my mind? How do I control my ego? How do I transcend the urges of anger and jealousy and envy? Whereas Duryodhan doesn't even understand it's me versus me. He just focuses on me versus you. You did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you, right? When I was reading this pastime, I just saw that this is, so many times this has happened. So many times where I'll share something. So I was taking a course and I asked a question. Malvika knows this story. She's laughing. I asked a question and the devotee who was giving this course, he answered me very, one of those answers you just get that just perks you right up. So he gave me such an answer and I was so pissed off. I was so angry. I was trying not to show it. I was like, it's fine, but I did appreciate, if he doesn't know the answer, all he says, he doesn't know the answer. Why does he have to do this? And I was just reflecting when I was preparing for this talk. I was like, my God, just something so tiny. Someone just gives quips at us. That Prabhu, by the way, he was the king of Quip City. He was able to quip at everyone. So when he quipped at me, I was just like, how dare he? How dare he? Because again, my mentality is focused on me versus you. I need to, even sometimes I catch myself doing this, but sometimes I ask questions to show that, look, I also know what you're talking about. I can think very well, versus just asking questions for my genuine, in a very humble mood so that I can genuinely benefit. So this mentality, Duryodhan versus Yudhishthir, is always in our mind. This mentality of competence versus success is always in our mind. And so we have to be sensitive about this. We have to see how we can work around this and just ask ourselves. And this is the point that I sort of want to conclude on. So just a summary. So the points I've mentioned is that, one, winning is inferior to success because winning comes at the cost of others. winning focuses on competence, which and focuses on competence, which is not really beneficial in the grand scheme of things, because it may get us some of the way, but it doesn't get us all the way there. Whereas success is not focused on the expense of others. It's me versus me. And it is focused on character, which can get us all the way through. Character is such a thing that even if we don't have the competence, because we have good attitude, we have good character, we will still overcome, because we will get through that character, we will still get the competence needed to make it all the way through. That is the benefit of character. That even if you don't have competence, character will still get you the competence you need. And so the point that I want to leave you with after talking about Duryodhan and all these points is that my plea to you when you're thinking about this, when you're introspecting about this, is try and understand that just because someone else has one hand over you does not necessarily mean you are a failure. In the material world, from the material perspective, you may be perceived as a failure, but you have to understand is that the material world places competence as or uses competence to determine whether you're successful or not. So the way the material world is evaluating your success is not even correct. So how can you be confident that what the material world tells you is actually what's going on? Everyone in our day-to-day life, in our material life, will say that, oh, we're successful because we had competence, and we are failures because we don't. But in the spiritual sense, we need to understand that we are only successful if we have character. And if we don't have character, then whilst we may be winning in the material world, we may not necessarily be successful in the grander scheme of things. If we may win 1 battle, 2 battles, 3 battles, 4 battles, but we won't win the ultimate battle that is needed for our life to be a success. And what is that one thing that is required for our life to be a success? That one thing is samsiddhir haritoshanam, to please Lord Krishna. And by pleasing Lord Krishna, our success really comes from this, to re-establish ourselves in the original relationship that we had with Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the ultimate success. And Krishna will not see your competence at all. The only thing that attracts Krishna is character. If he starts judging you based on competence, we will all fail, because Krishna has so much, he has unlimited competence. The most competent man or woman in the world will have a mere spark of the fire of competence that Krishna has. So that is sort of what I want to end on. And I just want to share one more, pastime with you. And this has been, again, like through pharmacy school, even after pharmacy school, as I was trying to secure a position, and even before pharmacy school, for those of you who know, there've been so many sort of, I've met with so many failures, so many losses. So the one story that kept me going, and even society and people around me were like, dude, you've failed or you've lost. And the one story that kept me going was this. So this is from the Ramayana. I'm just going to take maybe another 10 minutes and then we can open it up for discussion. So in Ramayana, there is the main antagonist, as most of you may know, called Ravana. And then there's the protagonist, or who is Lord Ram, also the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And his eternal consort, Mother Sita. So one day, Mother Sita gets kidnapped by Ravan, the main antagonist, and she's been taken away. And as she's been taken away, she spots Jatayu, who is the king of the birds, seated on a tree. He's a very big sort of vulture that's seated on a tree. And she yells out, and at this point, Ravan has no sort of, or Ravan is so powerful that Sita cannot overpower him, and she's crying, and she's, of course, as you would, if you get kidnapped by anyone, whether you're a man or woman. So she yells to Jatayu, and the reason why did she yell to Jatayu? So Jatayu was a friend of Lord Ram. So and Sita knows this. So she yells to Jatayu that, "Oh Jatayu, please let my dear Lord Ram know that I'm being kidnapped by this vile demon, Ravan. Please do not attempt to fight him, knowing that he is more younger, he's more powerful, more capable than you. Please do not attempt to fight him, but just tell my Lord when he comes looking for me." Jatayu sees this. Jatayu, for comparison's sake, is like an 70-year-old retired bodybuilder. Ravan, on the other hand, is like a 25-year-old present active bodybuilder. Ravan is going to wipe and end Jatayu. Like, he is so powerful. And Jatayu understands this. So what does Jatayu do? He hears Mother Sita, and he knows that he can't fight Ravan. But upon hearing this, he awoke and he saw this, and he said that, this is the verse he said. He said, "O 10-headed Rakshasa, which means demon, you have no right to steal Mother Sita. I am Jatayu. I am coming from a line of great devotees of Lord Sri Ram. You should know that I am his surrendered servant. And so, by hook or crook, I will fight even if it takes my life until you surrender Mother Sita." Ravan has a chariot. He has a charioteer. He has bows, arrows, clubs, swords. Jatayu is a vulture. What does he have? He has his talents, not talents, like, the claws. He has his beak and he has his wings. Despite knowing this, he will say that I understand that you're much younger than me. You have more resources at your side. I'm an old, bird, and I have just my talents, my beak, and my wings. But still, I will not let you take Sita away. This is what he says. As long as there is any breath of life in my body, you will not take Sita away from this bhakta, from this devotee. And Ravan, when hearing this, he became, and then Jatayu challenged him to a battle, and Ravan became enraged, and he ordered his charioteer to turn around and just dive right at Jatayu. And Jatayu and Ravan is described engaged in a very fearsome battle. Jatayu took out his charioteer. He took out his horses, Ravan's horses. He took out, and so Ravan had to fight on ground, on his feet. And then and Ravan, on the other hand, he would take his arrows and he would shoot like hundreds of arrows towards Jatayu, where it would seem that Jatayu is actually covered in a cloud of arrows. And Jatayu, just by beating his wings, would drive all those arrows out. And all this is going on, and Jatayu is seeing that despite he's taking his talons, he's trying to scratch at Ravan, he's taking his beak, trying to, inflict pain on him, but he can't. And then he starts to wonder, like, what is happening? And he sees that Ravan's armor is really like no sort of, even an inch of skin or flesh is not showing, and that's why he cannot go through. So what Jatayu does is he goes and he breaks open Ravan's armor, and he starts to bite out raw chunks of his flesh to inflict pain on Ravan. As he's doing all of this, Jatayu starts to, obviously get tired. He doesn't have the same endurance Ravan did. And Ravan starts to notice this. So what he says, Ravan decides, is that I don't really have to fight him. I just have to outlast him. And he will, and then I'll be able to strike him. So Ravan starts to appear and disappear, starts to fly around this and that. And Jatayu just keeps on pushing one after the other, just keeps on pushing himself. Eventually, Jatayu takes a moment, takes a moment just to catch like a millisecond of breath. And seeing this, Ravan says, this is my opportunity. And he takes his sword and he cuts the wings and legs of Jatayu. One sweep for the wings and another sweep for the legs. And Jatayu falls. Yeah. And it is described that when Sita saw this, she literally screamed in pain and agony. You can imagine that Jatayu is this grand bird who's been fighting for Mother Sita, and he fell, and he was lying in his own pool of blood. And Mother Sita runs to him, and she holds on to him, and she prays that, "Oh Ram, just see this demon Ravan. He stole me away from you, and just see what he's done to your dear devotee Jatayu, who has willingly sacrificed his very life to save me." Right? So she's praying, and Ravan then commands her to come to him. And he's like, she cannot even bear the thought of leaving Jatayu like this. And so Ravan eventually comes, grabs her by the hair and drags her with him and takes her to Lanka. Lord Ram and Lakshman eventually get there, and they see this bird lying in a pool of his own blood. And after understanding that this was Jatayu, Ram says, what happened? And even in that moment, Jatayu is not worried about himself. The first thing he says is, "My dear Lord Ram, Ravan has taken away Mother Sita and he's flown in this direction." He's on the brink of death, and even then he's in the service. He's serving Lord Ram in this way. Anyways, eventually Jatayu dies. He leaves his body. And Lord Ram then performs his final rites. Lord Ram, it is worth mentioning, wasn't even present to perform his own father's rites, but he performed Jatayu's final rites. And he actually mentions that Lord Ram actually says this line that that Jatayu, he tells this line upon when Jatayu leaves his body, that Jatayu, please know this. On this day, this is Lord Ram saying, on the strength of my performing the last rites for you, your soul will immediately return to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, to be my eternal associate. He claims that. So from this story, who won? Who won? That's the question.
Oh, Jatayu won. I didn't know whether you were asking or whether you were. This is really
dude. Jatayu. Okay. Ravan won the battle because Jatayu got defeated. Again, clearly Bali took away my thunder, but Jatayu is the one who succeeded. Yeah. So this is the concept that I always like to come to, is that from one perspective, Ravan is the one who took away Sita, he killed Jatayu, and he won. He won, why? Because he won at the cost of somebody else, right? He won at the cost of Jatayu. But Jatayu succeeded because he was not dependent on Ravan for his success. Even though Ravan had done all of this, Jatayu, through his own internal character and piety, was still able to achieve success, was able to achieve something that even Dashrath, who was Lord Ram's, the Lord's father, couldn't get himself. So that is the power of character. And that doesn't, and again, just because Jatayu was successful does not mean Ravan cannot be successful. It wasn't at his cost, right? So please, and I know when I first understood this, the nature of the mind is we are going to go and we're going to see successful devotees. We're going to be like, oh, or we're going to see, people with devotees with opulence. We'll be like, oh, that's not success, because success depends on character. This devotee does not have character. This devotee only has material opulence. So what I'd like to say to that is, please just refrain from that and try to apply that same critique to your own self first. Try to see the opulence that I have. Do I take that as a sign of success? Or do I take my character as a sign of success? And I think that is and that is where I'd like to finish, is that just take that. Introspect in this way so that you yourself can walk towards the progress of spiritual success and make your life as successful as it can be. Hare Krishna. Any questions, comments, discussion? This is where I know I spoke for a while, but I would like to open it up to discussion, questions, comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, nice class. I just wanted to say one thing. I mean, it's more on a tangent, but you know me in tangents. So from the Ramanuja Sampradaya, Ramanujacharya performed a funeral from a devotee from the Chandala caste. And some of the devotees asked that, why did you go there? And then Ramanuja cited this pastime with Jatayu, that Lord Rama performed, the final rites because Jatayu was a devotee. So clearly, no matter what background you're from, if you're a devotee, then it transcends, a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And even in that story, even though the Chandalas were regarded as failures or outcasts, they still were successful in the eyes of a pure Vaishnava, right? So yeah, thank you so much for that, Prabhu.
I think Hari raised her hand.
Hello. Thank you for that. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. So I just want to say thank you for that class. It was it was a really good topic. And throughout the class, I was thinking of a sort of analogy in my life that I experienced. I just wanted to share that, and correct me if I'm wrong with how the analogy is in terms of winning versus succeeding. In undergrad, as many of you may have experienced, there's a lot of students who study all semester and work hard, and then when it comes exam time, they do the best that they can. And then there's also students who, I've noticed this a lot, who will pop an Addy 2 days before an exam, and they also end up winning. And I had a lot of friends come up to me and say, like, what's the point of working hard all semester if there's so many people who are just sort of cheating their way through it and they still do really, really well and they win. And I always say, like, they might be winning today, but you don't know what's going to happen in the future with what they're going to continue doing. And I really liked your point of how succeeding is important because it's what builds your character, and the character that you have is always going to contribute to your competence, and it may not necessarily be true the other way around. And I think that's a really important point to understand. And maintaining your character no matter what happens and no matter who you see winning I think is a really important point. So I really appreciated that comment.
Thank you so much, Hari, for that. This is, so I was myself in this boat where I would have to, for certain subjects, I would really, really study, really, really like, put in the time and effort. But then when it came into exam time, I wouldn't be able to capitalize on that. I wasn't able to score. Like I know a friend of mine in pharmacy school that would study 2 days before the test, and he would miss all semesters, study 2 days before the exam and kill it, absolutely like kill it, right? And I'm not trying to like bring him down or anything, but and then would be me, where I was studying like throughout the semester, and it came to exam and I just could not like get as good of a grade as he did. And first thing was that, the first thing I did was just to look at myself, and I'm like, what am I doing through this? So for me, because I was studying every day, I was like, no, I'm developing more discipline, I'm developing more time management skills, I'm developing more endurance, because things are not going to work out my way, and I'm getting the training now for when they don't in the future. Right? So first, taking out that me versus him comparison. The second thing, just to provide closure, is that when it came to practicums, like in pharmacy school, in practicums, you can't fool that. You can't just study the day before and go and walk into a patient's room or walk into a hospital and expect that you're going to get everything. It's not going to work that way. And what happened is this individual actually failed a couple of his rotations. And then he came, and that's when he started to put in this work. And he's like, no, I need to start studying every day. But because he was not used to that aspect during undergrad, it was a very difficult concept for him to ascertain. So you're all right, first of all, right on the right track, is that even though they may not be getting this grades, they're still developing that discipline, that endurance, that ability to keep on going, even if they don't really capitalize in the final exams. And the other thing is, they're also developing this idea that the results is out of my hand, the fruit is out of my hand, which is what Krishna mentions in the Gita. So these are some of the soft, you can say, aspects, the soft skills that we often miss out upon. And it's unfortunate that in modern day system, whether it be school or in our careers, don't have a way of measuring these. But these are very important skills that can definitely further our character as well. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adi, for the practical lecture. I have a question. Do you happen to know how does any of our scriptures define character?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. There are lots of statements in the Shastra that help us, that can sort of allude us to what character is defined as. I'm just going to pull out just one example on the top of my mind. One example is in Shikshastakam, which were the 7 or 8 instructions, I forget how many verses, that were left by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And one of those, I think the third verse in that is Trinadapi Sunichena Tarodapi Shahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtanya Sadahari. So the translation of that is that one should be Trinadapi Sunichena Tarora, like one should be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, ready to offer all respects onto others without expecting anything in return. Just in this one verse, you can understand character, what the Shastras or what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, defines as character: humility, tolerance, ability to give respects onto others without expecting anything in return, and devoid of all sense of false prestige. Right? So there are many statements like this. In the Gita, I'm sure you can find state a list. There's a list, actually, there's a verse that lists out all the characters of a Brahmin, or the characters that are actually, or the characteristics of a Brahmin or of a devotee that is pleasing to the Lord. The ultimate thing is that, and this is, I'm glad you brought this question up, is that, and I forgot to mention this, is that character is really what is going to attract Krishna, ladies and gentlemen. That is the only thing. It's not going to be the amount of rounds you do if you are treating the Vaishnavas like crap. He's not going to look at how many times you've gone on the altar if you're just gossiping and being arrogant to everyone else around you. There are lots of stories about this in the Shastra that hit this point. And yes, Dhruva Prabhu has said, chapter 18, text 42, Bhagavad Gita, there's an entire list, right? Another example from the Shastra is the difference between Karna and Arjuna. So if you have read the Mahabharata, you understand Karna, again, was on the side of the Pandavas, was one personality, or sorry, Karna was one personality and then Arjuna was another. As kids, there is a duel between Arjuna and Karna, or as young adults. And Karna comes to the, to the arena, and he already has all these spiritual and celestial weapons. He's already acquired them. Arjuna has not even begun to understand. He just knows, he's very adept in what he knows, but he hasn't begun to acquire any celestial weapons. And he comes and he, he shows all these plethora of celestial weapons. So Karna already has the competence. Arjuna doesn't. But still, Krishna chooses to be the charioteer of only Arjuna. Why? Because Arjuna has the character. Arjuna has the humility. Arjuna has the understanding that I don't have everything, and I'm not, I don't have everything over there. So, what are you doing? Sorry. My dad was just in the back. So anyone saw the call, this was a little embarrassing. He literally just came to get a pillow so that he could, my pillow, because I have a really good pillow, so he can take a nap. Anyways, this is one of those moments where life embarrasses you, but you move on because you're not focused on competence, you're focused on character. Practical application, Prabhus. Anyways, as I was saying, so he doesn't have all the competence, but because he has the character that allows him to get all the celestial weapons down the line in the Mahabharata. He gets all the celestial weapons, and not only that, he gets the proper knowledge to use them. And ultimately, who wins? Arjuna wins. Even by winning and by succeeding, Arjuna comes out on top. Because he has the character, he has the attitude, right? Karna, he's always boasting about his competence. I have so many celestial weapons, I have this, I have that. And he's always lamenting about his losses, which is that he wasn't born, because he didn't have a noble birth, right? Whereas Arjuna, doesn't matter what's going on, he's always grateful, always humble, always willing to push himself. So, yeah.
Thank you for that definition, Prabhu.
Definitely check out Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, text 42, Prabhu. It has really, it's very succinct.
Succinct.
Whatever that word is.
I think Morgan also had something to share.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to first say thank you.
Oh, I think you just went on mute, Morgan.
Sorry. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you because this was a really good class. It really resonated with me. And I just, at the beginning, you were saying a bit about how sometimes we confuse our low self-esteem with humility. And then I was also thinking on the other side, like when you are kind of winning in life or you're kind of like winning your smaller goals and stuff in life. I was just wondering if you had anything more to say about how you kind of keep like a truly humble mindset in that situation.
I have a few thoughts. Anyone, please, Dhruva Prabhu, Natama Prabhu, Anjanaya, Tirtha Prabhu, Isha, if you have any thoughts to add to this, please. But my initial thought is this. Humility actually comes from, and I actually have something written about this. So humility comes from the understanding that every opulence that we have is actually because of, it's a gift of God, it's a gift of Krishna. Every opulence that we have, right? And so even when we get opulence, when we have competence, we take it, if we understand that this is actually a gift from Krishna, that actually automatically puts us in a position to be humble. That's a very good place to start, right? Because then the next question comes, well, if this is a gift from Krishna, if this is a gift from God, if this is a blessing from God, then I want to use it in His service. I want to use it in a way that He will be pleased. I want to use it in a way that His devotees will be pleased. So automatically you assume a mood of humility, you assume a mood of servitude, and that automatically keeps you humble, even when you get all the opulence that you know, even if you get to the apex of opulence and competence. And actually, it's funny that when any opulence that we get, any competence that we get from God, if we stay in this mood and actually use it in the service of His devotees or in the service of the Lord Himself, then what actually happens is the Lord, seeing this, gifts us with more competence and more opulence, right? Again, this is referring to the theme of that even though we have this competence, the focus is on the character, the character of humility, right? Now, the other way we can cultivate humility when we do have weaknesses, and instead of genuine humility, so I hope I addressed the side of the when we have lots of competence, when we have lots of opulence. Did I address that point?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to address the point about when we don't have the competence, when we don't have the opulence, how do we stay humble instead of becoming, instead of having low self-esteem, and how do we distinguish the two? So the way I like to distinguish it is just come to terms with it first. I'm not perfect. I do have my weaknesses. I am on the process of improving myself, but yeah, I am but a human. If I was perfect, I wouldn't be in this world to begin with. I would be somewhere else. I would be with Krishna, right? So I'm not perfect. I'm here. And just that, and I tell you because I've done this myself, just that acceptance, just that coming to terms that I am not perfect. I do not have everything down. Just that itself makes us humble because it brings about the humanity that is dormant within us. It brings that out, and we start to say, yeah, I'm not there. And it actually makes us more secure as well. Because low self-esteem, low self-confidence comes from us comparing ourselves with others. But if we're just comfortable in ourselves and saying that, yeah, I do have ego, or I do have, I do struggle with my japa, with my chanting. I do struggle with, my sadhana practice. That first, it allows us to be genuinely humble because we see ourselves as, yeah, we are not great, and we don't have to be great all the time. We can be where we are. And then that also inspires us to move towards um, a position of improvement, of progression, right? It allows us to progress in that way because we say that, okay, I'm not there, but I want to be there. So how do I get there? Right? And through that journey, the other introspection that comes is that I can't do this on my own. I have tried to do this on my own and I have failed every single time. So Krishna, please help me. I want to become a better devotee. I want to become this, and and even if you want opulence, I do want to get this opulence so that I can offer this in service back to you. And this is what I want to do for you. Please help me in this way. And that also helps us become humble, because when we start to acquire that competence, when we start to acquire that opulence, we understand that this has only come because Krishna has given it to us. So everything that I am, you start to move towards this realization that everything I am is because of Krishna. And that genuinely just humbles us so much in front of others, because we are like, by our own merit, we are nothing. But because Krishna is merciful to us, we are everything. Does that help?
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
I think Isha wanted to also add something. So Isha, I'm just going to call you out and you can add. So yeah.
No, I just wanted to, I think Anand Madhav kind of covered it at the end, but I was just thinking that prayers are really powerful in both the scenarios, whether we have been blessed with skills and opulence or we haven't. So in the first case, we can always pray, as Anand Madhav was saying, you know, to be humble and offer whatever we have in Krishna's service. And in the second case, if we really are, if we really have a deep desire to do a service, then we can pray to Krishna for whatever skill it is. And I think in both the cases, it kind of helps us develop that mood of surrender to Krishna. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you, Isha, for that. I can say for myself, like, prayer is very, very important, and it has proved very essential to my spiritual practice. It has proved very like, the stuff I'm struggling with, even if there are decisions that I need to make, but I don't know how to make them, I just pray. And you'd be surprised. Like, there have been instances where I've prayed I've prayed, and then within 10 minutes, the solution has manifested. So prayer is very, very, very essential. And everyone thinks that, prayer has to be this grand, just like the way I see prayer, the way Sachidananda Maharaj described prayer to me was that it is very, it just has to be sincere, and it just has to be honest. And through that, you can just, that is it. Those are the only requirements. And you do that, and you'll be surprised with the miracles you will see in your life.
I don't know whether Shweta, I didn't get a chance to hear from you, or we didn't get a chance to hear from you on your takebacks, or Nandini, or Dhruva Prabhu is also on this call, who I'm sure has so much to offer. Anjaneya has tuned in all the way from Toronto, so I'm sure he has a lot to offer too. So if you guys have anything to say, we can sort of conclude with you guys wrapping up, and then we can go from there.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. Thanks, Malvika. Thanks, Ananda Madhava. It was a great class, very illuminating, and I really related and resonated with some of the examples you provided. I definitely do see in society that we have a huge emphasis on winning, not only in school, but also in university and the workplace. When you initially brought up the topic, I saw winning is more short-term and success is more long-term. So that's another way I kind of differentiated the two. And you're right, corporations are based on short-term profits, even if that puts their long-term success in jeopardy at times. So my question for you is, how do we explain to the general lay person that may not be into Krishna consciousness, the importance of success and character versus winning and competence?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The way I sort of explain it, or the way I would attempt, again, Ananda Prabhu, Dhruva Prabhu, Janaya Tirtha, you guys can jump in, but the way I would explain it is you're not always going to have someone to compete with. So you can't always win. And even if you want to win, sooner or later, you're going to hit a roadblock where someone is going to be better than you. And you can pull out real life examples. Steve Jobs, if you want to talk about winning and losing, he won all the time, but then he lost to cancer. Okay. You can talk about, and you can talk about so many, like Donald Trump, he won, but like, I don't think he's able to sleep at night. Especially, or even if he does, I want to ask him how, like, because like, I'd like to know. But there are lots of different aspects, and at every point, there is going to be a loss. And whilst we cannot control how much opulence the other party has or the situations we are put in, we can definitely control our response, our internal response to the situation, and our internal thinking. And that is succeeding, because that is not reliant on the situation, on the externals, right? And again, if someone, and you can have competence, like someone may be, like I may be a competent professional now, but in 50 years from now, I mean, I'm not going to be competent, right? But if I have my character in place, that even when competence regarding, my ability to practice pharmacy is taken away, I'll still have character that will still allow me to be a successful person in life.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Winning is very temporary. And I think the Donald Trump example is a good one, because most people would agree that while he won the presidency, that he's not very successful as a person, or in general. I think most people I meet would agree with that. So yeah, thanks.
I can add something to that also. First off, I'd say if dealing with somebody who's not specifically a devotee, it's hard to really gauge what to tell them. If they themselves are inquiring, then I would say it's free to give them whatever we've heard here. Absolutely. But even Prabhupada said that we shouldn't poke people who are materially successful and tell them that it's not good, because we have to understand that they've earned it. They've done the work, whatever it is. Even if they don't have the character, they've done what needs to be done to get where they are, and for that they have that. So unless they're really interested in understanding what it means to be to have good character and really what true success is, we can't really do anything. Because in my opinion, Donald Trump probably sleeps pretty well at night. like I don't think he cares. Like personally, I don't think he cares. He's very proud, and that's it. The difference between pride and humility, it's really big. And unless you have some insight to understand that one is detrimental, there's not really much that person can do.
Thanks, Dhruva.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prabhu. I think Malika muted me, but thank you so much.
My mistake. That was not intentional.
I also want to get Janaya Tirtha. Please do share something.
Hi, Bo. I'm so sorry. I was just messaging Malvika that I have another call in like a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to say you made some really good points about characteristics and competencies. And I mean, the last 5 minutes of discussion on the same subject matter was really cool. So thank you so much. I wish I could compose my thoughts and speak, but I'm just thinking about the next call. But I'm hoping to join in for these sanghas in the upcoming weeks. So thank you so much for making some really good points on Mahabharata and Ramayana. That was really insightful. So thanks for that. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Nandini.
Hello, Hare Krishna. First, thank you for the wonderful talk, lecture. I appreciate it. I'm glad that I was able to take part. One thing that I can say that's embarrassing is that I accidentally sent everybody a group message when I didn't mean to. So that's cool. As we were just talking about it, it happened, and I was like, oh God. But I guess it kind of relates back to humility and things like that as well. Like, it's not like I was saying anything bad. I like the lecture that you were giving and all the points that you were making. I guess you can, there's also that quote that says, like, everybody always says, like, the grass is greener on the other side. I don't technically agree with that quote, just because if we want to build in character and we want to be better as people and be successful in life, the grass will always be green where you water it and where you choose to put your time and your efforts. So you can look over to other people and look at their success and look at how wonderful they're doing things. But if you're not willing to put in the time and the effort to build on your own character and build on the person that you're wanting to be, and like you kind of said, like, there's only so far that you can win in life, because you always have to put somebody else down in order to win in something. But if you kind of turn that around and be like, well, if I was just in competition with myself all the time, then technically you would be successful and winning at the same time, because you are just trying to beat yourself. So I'm not saying necessarily that you're trying to put yourself down, but it's like you're raising the bar for yourself to have a better standard in life, to be successful and winning, because you're not in competition with anybody else but yourself. So for example, I guess you could say in like my life, you could say like working out, for example, like something that's I'm passionate about working out and I want to be better. So that there are ups and downs in that kind of a situation, because I lose weight and then I sometimes gain weight or whatever. But if I'm constantly in competition or constantly wanting to, or maybe I'm getting them both confused and winning and succeeding. But if I'm looking at my previous self and I'm like, okay, I was at this point at this time in my life, and now I'm trying to be at this point. Well, if I'm just in competition, or if I'm trying to build my character or whatever, then I will always just be I'll always end up being successful, because I'm looking at how I was at one point and just wanting to one up that one at that point. So I don't know if that makes winning success at the same bar, because I'm not trying to put anybody else down. I'm just trying to build on myself. Is that the same thing, or would it still technically be different?
The point is that your success depends on you.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you're still succeeding, right? And that is the thing, is the perspective. Is your perspective, and the perspective is what makes all the difference. Is your perspective focused on self-improvement based on your previous self, or is your perspective based on competition? Because once that competition is gone, so is your motivation to better yourself.
That's true.
But if you're always thinking how you can up your past self, then you can keep on doing this.
Yeah, and that's also, I guess you could say that that's almost like a better mindset to have then, because if you're in competition with yourself, that's not necessarily the greatest. Because if you end up losing and you end up reverting back to not being better than the time that you were maybe a year ago, then you'll be like, oh, I just lost that. But instead of realizing that you lost something, you can also realize, no, but I've gained something because I learned this about myself. I learned this about other people. I learned this about the journey that I was on and things like that. So you're also building your character and you're also becoming successful. So thank you. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. I think Harsha hasn't said anything. So please, if you have anything to comment, any sort of takeaways, please do share. All right then. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Just in closing, I don't know if I speak for everyone, but personally, I find the best lectures are those that are thought-provoking. And because me, I'm not generally full of questions when it comes to like sitting in on lectures or having discussions, but the best lectures and classes that I've been in are ones that do provoke further discussion through questions and comments. And even better still are classes that when those thoughts and questions arise in my mind, they're answered shortly thereafter. And I've experienced that here, and I'm very grateful. And I really like what you said. And moreover, I feel we could continue discussing this subject into the late afternoon, and which I don't think we will, but I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for your kind words, Prabhu. That's thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. Sorry it took